Welcome to the show where we expose new perspectives on our ever-evolving world through the lenses of various industries, cultures, and backgrounds. Our guests are disruptors, united by a common goal to bring their purpose to life. Whether they're from the commercial world or third sector, from the global north or the global south, expect an inspirational journey that will transform your perspective on just what is possible. My name is Philippa White, and welcome to Thai Unearthed. Today, we're diving into the topic of intuition. Now, some of you might think intuition sounds, a bit woo-woo, but by the end of this episode, you'll see why learning to recognize and harness it is one of the greatest superpowers at your disposal. Hello and welcome to episode 97 of Thai Unearthed. Today's guest is Hrund Gunnsteinsdóttir, an Icelandic author, filmmaker, and sustainability leader who's passionate about bringing together ideas and people from across sectors to inspire creativity and drive real-world solutions. Hrund's journey is fascinating. From managing post-war reconstruction in Kosovo and helping craft a gender equality manual that later became law, to leaving her full-time UN role due to burnout, and then completely reinventing herself. She draws on her global experience from sustainable business and development to the arts to show how real change begins within. In today's conversation, Hrund explains how intuition isn't just a feeling, but a skill we can all cultivate. She delves into the thought patterns and rhythms of change, showing how tapping into these rhythms can elevate our intelligence and insight. You'll leave this podcast with fresh perspectives on self-awareness, and Hrund offers practical tools to help unlock your own intuitive power to navigate the complexity of modern life. So whether you're out on a run or relaxing with your favorite beverage, let's jump into this conversation with Hrund. Hrund, thank you so much for joining us today. I am so excited for this conversation, and I'm just thrilled we're finally making it happen. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me. It's such a pleasure, and I've been looking really much forward to this.
I have too. And your energy comes through on the LinkedIn posts and everything, and I'm feeling it now, which is great. So I'm really, really, really looking forward to this. Before we go into all of my questions and into this conversation, perhaps you can tell our listeners where you are sitting right now.
I'm sitting right now in the countryside in Germany. This is where my partner has a home, and we go here on the weekends, and it's a beautiful paradise. It's a location in the forest, and we have bees and roses and lots of fruit trees and a vegetable garden and lots of green and beautiful. And after this conversation, we're going to go cycling for about 2 hours somewhere in the forest. So this is where I am at the moment, feeling very grounded and deeply grateful.
I love the really solid sort of stone wall behind you. I mean, you can see that it's an old stone building.
Yes, and it's done it was renovated many years ago, and it was about to collapse, this house. But the renovation is all very sustainably. You know, it's all natural material, and the walls are very thick, so that when it's really warm outside, it's still just really cool temperatures inside. We make our own electricity, and there's water from the fountain, and it's sustainable living. Wow. It's really a beautiful place. Yeah.
How lucky.
I really love it. Yeah.
How lucky. How wonderful. As we start this conversation, perhaps you can tell us a little bit about you and your story.
So I'm Hrund. I'm from Iceland. I grew up wanting to be a writer. Somewhere in my teenage years, that was kind of buried very deep inside me. I wanted to explore the world. I wanted to get to know people and different cultures, and basically always had this very deep sense of belonging on Earth, not necessarily in one country, and wanting to make the world a better place. So I remember when I was very young, thinking, hang on, maybe it's not very clear where I end and somebody else begins that lives in a different part of the world, thoughts like that. So I go on and I study social anthropology. I studied development studies, complex emergencies in Iceland and in London. And very quickly, I go on to work with the United Nations. So I had dreamt of working for the UN. Things happened very quickly for me. So I was only 27 when I moved to Kosovo to be a program manager or head of agency for a small agency called UNIFEM at the time. It's now called UN Women. This was the first time UNIFEM was involved in post-conflict reconstruction work. And it was a year, and it felt like 10 years packed into one when it came to my learning curve and maturity. And, going to Kosovo was like walking into an open wound. It was just after the war, and I was really determined to do my best to make people's lives better and help rebuild. I didn't give my health, my well-being, or my energy any thought. I just really thought I could put that aside and just... So I stayed there for a year, and the work it was an amazing year. I made really good friends, and we applied a participatory approach, so-called, which is all about creating local ownership and empowering people to take ownership and define what their needs are. We managed to bring together people and women from different groups, ethnic groups, professional groups, different parts of Yugoslavia in a way, and also Kosovo, who had actually some of them been in deep conflict against each other. We managed to bring them together. And one of the things that they succeeded in doing was to create a gender equality manual for Kosovo, which later became law. So that was amazing. After the year, I had taken a competitive examination with the UN, which is open, or was at least open, for people from countries that were unrepresented within the core UN structures. So I took the 2 days examination and was offered a position with the UN, which was a permanent position. It's like when you start to work for the Foreign Office, you travel the world and that becomes your career. So that was how my career looked like when I was close to 29. I started working for the UN in Geneva. I started working in the statistical division, analyzing gender disaggregated data from 55 member states. And to make a long story short, I really felt like we were serving a system instead of the system serving people on the planet. I was also going through really rough time in my private life. I'd had some unresolved health issues from my Kosovo time. Everything kind of came into one, and I ended up just resigning from my permanent position. And what I would call, I hit a wall. I collapsed. I hit a wall. I didn't know what to call it. Burnout wasn't a thing. It wasn't a word that I knew then. So I resigned from the UN. But whilst I was in a mental and physical space that was very hard, it was a dark place. It was, I couldn't tie my own shoes. My back was so bad. I was diagnosed with 3 slipped discs. I was told I wouldn't necessarily be able to work full-time ever again. But in the middle of all this kind of whirlwind of difficult experiences, let's put it that way, I managed to gain a moment of clarity where I just met myself being an older woman. I walked down to the coast where I lived, and I just had this moment with myself. I met myself as an older woman after having asked myself, what kind of a life do I want to have lived when I look back? And what I saw was very different from how I was feeling and how I was finding myself in my new role. And I just knew that I needed to make some big changes in my life, both think about how do I want to lead my life and where do I want to do it. So I go back to Geneva. I resigned from my job. And on my last day at work in the Palais des Nations in Geneva, I'm sitting on a chair and I'm having an imaginary conversation with Kofi Annan, the then Secretary General of the UN, where I promised that I'll stay true to the ideals of the UN, wanting to make the world a better place. But I promised myself that I would follow through with persistent ideas that were likely to have good impact on the world, no matter which sector or what disciplines I was working with or groups of people. So that's kind of what I've been doing since. So since then, I've had more than 20 titles in my life, and this includes I've worked in investment. I've chaired Iceland's biggest innovation public grant fund. I've been a mentor for entrepreneurs. I've been an entrepreneur. for example, in education, where I created a disruptive university program. I continue to work for the UN on certain assignments as a consultant for some years. I've been engaged with the World Economic Forum. Recently, I led Iceland's Sustainability Center for about 5 years. I directed and wrote a film about intuition, which was shown on Netflix worldwide from 2016 and 17. And then now most recently left my job in Iceland and decided to follow through with my book, which is coming out in all continents, in 13 languages at least, about intuition.
Yeah, tell us about your book. Was there a catalyst to specifically about going down that route?
Exactly. That's a great question, because I think that at the core of all this is my personal, in a way, discovering for myself, but also then later seeing it everywhere around me. It's that deep conviction that we now live in a world that is changing so fast, and it has been changing so fast in the last recent decades, but our systems are not keeping up with these changes, whether it's education or, global architecture around finance or whatever it is. So our systems need changing, but systems don't change themselves. It's people like you and me that change systems. And that I don't only feel strongly about, I now have been able to accumulate experience and read research and done research on this topic. So it's my deep conviction that actually there is this incredible, beautiful, magnificent, largely intangible world within every single one of us. And I think we're kind of finding it harder and harder to access that world. It's our intuition. It is a huge part of our intellectual faculty. It's connection with our emotions. It's connecting with our hearts. It's our connection with our whole body, because our whole body is an intelligent system. And so I think we've been neglecting intuition for a very long time. It's very interesting when you do research and read around it and contemplate, like, why should that be? And let's not go into that here. I think that'll take another podcast interview. But it is really taking me to the place where I'm on a mission to get all of us to deepen our understanding of what intuition is, to understand how fundamental it is to our intelligence, and why it's important for us to reclaim ownership and more trust in our own intelligence in the world we live in today.
What is the name of your book?
My book is called Insight, which is the Icelandic word for intuition. One of the subtitles is Heal, Revive, and Reset with the Icelandic art of intuition. The reason why I keep using the Icelandic word for intuition is because I discovered during many years of both practice and research and conversations with leaders from around the world that we have very different definitions about intuition. It's all from the continuum of defining intuition as an irrational impulse that we shouldn't rely on, all the way to saying it's a woo-woo that, hasn't been backed by science. And then somewhere in between, we have very sophisticated, rigorous research showing that actually a well-honed intuition is where we can take our best decisions. It is where our highest minds, in the form of Nobel laureates and what we call human genius, this is the key ingredient to their big leaps and their big discoveries throughout the years. It's when they know how to shift between analysis and intuition and understand how these things merge together. But I should say both the Nobel laureates, because I'm thinking about a certain research, but also most of us, we might do this, but we are not really that aware. And even the Nobel laureates are not always aware, or the scientists or the artists, of how this works. They just have a feel. They just kind of unconsciously know their cue, when to shift between these two rhythms.
I believe a lot in intuition. And I would say that I think probably a lot of entrepreneurs probably do really believe in intuition. On different levels, you go down a certain path, and then when you look back and you think, God, what, how did I know? And there's so much to that. But when I do talk to people about intuition, because I am spiritual to an extent, but I'm not religious. There's something about energy, and I don't even know how to articulate it. And maybe this is what intuition is. But when I go down this route and I'm talking to people who maybe aren't very spiritual, or certainly don't really understand this, they do think it's a bit woo-woo. It's hard to make sense of it. People are like, no, well, you just, you knew what to do and you're lucky, or whatever it might be. What really resonated with me when I've heard you speak, or I've read some of your work, you do say that Insight brings together the scientific and the spiritual, you know, the solid and the poetic, and that it refers to the ever-flowing conscious mind that can't be put into boxes, otherwise it doesn't flow. Now, I love how you have said that this is scientifically proven as well as deeply spiritual. And I'm covered in goosebumps. I can relate to that. But I don't know the scientific side of this. And I imagine that your book, I haven't read it yet, but I imagine that your book is full of examples. And I know from your TED Talk, you know, you do touch on some examples. And I just wonder, for our listeners, can you bring this to life, perhaps with stories or examples, so that the listeners don't just sort of see this as like a woo-woo kind of, okay, intuition. How can you elaborate a little bit more for the non-believers?
Yeah, thank you. So this is a great question. There's a lot in there, so don't hesitate to direct me if I'm going off track. So we have consciousness. By far, the biggest part of our consciousness is unconscious. It's stored in our whole bodies. We pick up sensory data, information, whatever we want to call it, stimulation with our whole body and senses. It's stored in our body, and most of the things that we are learning throughout every minute of every day is unconscious. Our very focused conscious mind is on top of things like, I'm going to go to the shop now and shop. I'm going to do this analysis before 3:00. I'm going to pick up the kids and I see you, hi, you know, all these different things. But most of the things that are going on are unconscious to us. So our intuition is our gateway into this. It bridges, it helps us tap into the unconscious. Now, the unconscious, and this is why I love the Icelandic word for intuition, insight, because it means to see within, like you described perfectly. So it's the sea within. There's so much going on. There's tide and wave in the sea within. It's constantly moving. You know, it's the world of imagination, emotions, decisions that we take that may emerge later in life, clearly or unclearly, or feeling spontaneous, but they've been brewing for a very long time. This is the inner world that is constantly making new connections, which also depends on our brains and our thought patterns, to what extent we allow that to emerge as well. That's another interesting connection. Our intuition is different from instinct. We confuse these terms together. So we say instinct is something that's more genetically inherited. It's, you know, it's our old brain that helps us escape from the wild animals or the fight or flight mode, which we are in way too much in today's world for different reasons and perhaps the wrong reasons. But intuition is something that we keep developing throughout our lives. There are a few things here that I want to highlight. You know, it's what we put in informs our intuition. It shapes how we show up, the decisions that we take, how we perceive the world, what people we are, and what course we choose to navigate. Again, most of this is unconscious to us. That's why it's so important to be aligned and connected with your intuition. It's also because of the overflow of information and the constant distraction and stimulation that we're going through. It makes it even more important for us to be in control of what we're taking in. You know, like somebody said to me, let's not be trash bins. Because if we just allow agents to throw trash at us, we're going to give out trash, right? It's an extreme description, but I kind of like it. So what we put in comes out again. So that's very important for us to be aware of. And also the fact that it's ever flowing. You know, we've heard about this condition to be in a state of flow. When we put hand to head, you know, when we are just doing something and we lose track of time and we're totally in the zone, we are in a very brilliant way going slightly beyond the limitation of what we know how to do. So we are challenging us in a healthy way. So we are absolutely focused on the task at hand. It's called the highest form of attention that humans can offer. And so that is being in sync with our intuition. And when I say that intuition is fundamental to our intelligence, that's what it means. It's not a singular thing inside our brain or gut or heart. It is actually the flow of everything that our intelligence is combined of. So for example, in order to reason well, you need good intuition. And without intuition, there wouldn't be much innovation or art. So it's that kind of combination. And sometimes the reason why I draw out the poetic, because the Icelandic word in means inside or into. Sæi means to see or to see. So it's the see within, and it also to see within. So self-awareness is key to having any chance of harnessing your own intuition, because you have your intuition. I can't tell you what it is and how you feel it. And you have to sense it and understand it with your whole being and body.
So I'm going to get to self-awareness in a second because I love that other part that I talk a lot about that with my work as well. But before we get there, do you have any stories just about that scientific, more proven side to intuition? Where have the people that you've spoken to, the stories that you have in your book, where intuition became a huge driving force of their success? Do you have a story that you think of that inspires you that can help bring this to life? I feel like, you wouldn't have made the life choices that you made had you not been in touch with yourself and had that self-awareness and in touch with your intuition. I feel the same way, but there's a lot of people who are stuck in that hamster wheel, or they're just following what society or culture, or they're on a route that maybe they're not living with intention. If you can talk to them.
Yeah. So actually that's a really useful cue to take this to, because there are many different varying examples. I'll take an example of my dear friend, Henrik Sala, who is today a National Geographic explorer in residence and one of the founders of the Pristine Seas project. Henrik Sala grew up by the sea in Spain, and he always dreamt of becoming an ocean explorer like Jacques Cousteau. Yeah. He loved the ocean. He went on to study, and he became a marine biologist. He did really well in his studies. He went on to work in a university. He became a professor, and he was teaching. And then one day he just wakes up and realized that he feels that he's literally writing the obituary of the ocean. He's watching it from a great distance as its health deteriorates. And he doesn't feel like he's doing anything about it. He feels very disconnected from the ocean, the topic of his passion. So he takes a dramatic decision and resigns from his professor position. And he commits himself to spend most of his time in the ocean in order to explore it firsthand, immerse himself in the ocean in order to understand it fully with all his senses and all his being and intuition. Shortly after I got to know Henrik Sala, we started talking, and I had already started my research. This is 2011 around intuition, and he shares with me an academic paper that he wrote in university with his friend about intuition. So, things are often looming for a long time. But anyway, so he resigns. He commits himself to spending most of his time in the ocean because we need to be connected with the world, the real world we live in order to grow our intuition about it. Totally. And to be able to have an impact and do something. And also to do something in the moment. That's another thing which we can come to later. So he founds the Pristine Seas project. Since then, the Pristine Seas has led to the establishment of 27 of the largest protected ocean areas in the world, which is an incredible achievement because what they do is they engage filmmakers who create visuals. They engage local leaders, local people who come from the region that we're talking about each time. And they engage them in what is the challenge, the problem, why should we do this, how do we do this? And then they have the ownership, the people who are the guardians of the ocean in every place. So Henrik's story is I think highly inspiring because I think for many of us, we can relate to working somewhere that's far away from the things that we feel like we should be working on or we think we are working on, but we don't feel that sense of connection. And also, people all over the world are working in places where they feel like they really don't matter. Yeah. They can be easily replaced. And I cannot tell you how many emails and messages I received from people in different jobs. Like, I'm sure some of them took a train to go to a cafe to send me an email, to people who are professors in universities or CEOs of companies, but people who are sharing the same story again and again. They feel disconnected. They can't find that deep sense of security that we all need for so many reasons. And one of them is to be able to take decision, to be able to have the confidence in trusting our own senses and feelings and experiences, and to be able to stay present in the moment. Gosh, and presence is hugely important because we have this from the world of business, military, arts, spiritual practices, wherever we look. There's even for sports coach, which I interview in my book, our ability to be present in the moment defines our ability to react to unexpected circumstances.
Totally. to that point, actually, so in the last section of my book, so my book's called Return on Humanity, Leadership Lessons from All Corners of the World.
An amazing book. So I'm halfway into it. It's amazing. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. As I said at the beginning of the book, I define, what is humanity and what does it mean to be more human? Self-awareness is one of those pillars. Then I talk about the importance of interconnectedness. So it's understanding our impact on the world and sort of that, cause and effect. And then interdependence is a big one, which is understanding the need for outside voices to come in and, what you put in. I love that you said that. It's sort of what information, what stimulus are you bringing into your knowledge base to then be able to build on that? And it's very egotistical to sort of think that we have all the answers, or without sort of outside voices coming in, we can make decisions, because it's obviously impossible. And that's why, bringing sectors together is so important, and going into communities is so important. And that connection and belonging, because even at a company, there are so many people, even if you're the owner of that company or running that company, there are so many people within that company that know things that you don't know, and you need them, and they need to feel that they are needed. Yes. So I just could not agree more. In my book, it's focused on sort of individuals and, before you're a leader, before you work at a company, you're a human being, and just sort of talking about how being more human just makes life better. Then we talk about leadership and companies. And then I do talk about the world. And so the last part is the impact on the world when people are more human. And to be more human, as I mentioned, has a lot to do with self-awareness and being in touch with who you are. And you then, in your work, you talk a lot about systems and how systems don't change themselves, which you said at the beginning, and how it's people like us that change these systems. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's why I've been doing what I've been doing for 20 years. And we can't change systems without changing ourselves. And so we need to be in touch with who we are. I would just love for you to dive into that a little bit more, because I feel like we are so aligned with what we have been working towards, our research, our work. We come at it from different points of view, but there's so many overlaps. And I just would love for you to just unearth that a little bit more for our listeners. I find it fascinating.
Yeah, thank you. And feel free to jump in as well, because I'd love to hear also your thoughts on this. But what I mean by this is that the change that we need to see in the world today comes from within us. So like you say, that's because systems don't change themselves. It's people that change systems. I use the phrase shifting the center of gravity in ourselves. Nice. When I was this version of me, when I was this Hrund who thought she was following her heart and was in many ways, but wasn't aligned with it, wasn't in sync with it and her inner voice, it wasn't so hard to play that role, to be like, to just doing really well at work and waking up in the morning and going to work and doing my job. And I did it well. It's not like we can't do it well, but when our center of gravity shifts so that we are deeply aligned with who we are, this informs how we experience our connection with other people and the planet. Definitely the natural world. And also the world around us, whatever world that is. If we live in a very concrete world with little nature, that is also our world. So it shifts the center of gravity in how we show up. So it becomes intuitive to understand that extrapolating too much from nature is going to be a bad decision someday. It becomes intuitive to understand that. We become much more sensitized towards how it is that when we step into a room, how we co-regulate as a species. How my energy gets projected on you, and I can either come in and say, hi, it's lovely to see you. I just noticed what you did yesterday. It's like, thank you for doing that. Or I can come in with a really bad energy and kind of break your heart a little bit. Yeah. So that's the impact that we have on a very cellular level, like very energetic level, and everything in between. With changing systems, there is a lot of emphasis in our conversations in the world today to say, we as collectives, we together change systems. And we need to do it together. There is no one leader doing it. We do it together. Let's say an organization or a company, and there is a CEO who comes and take over that company. And that person is strongly aligned with her humanity, strongly aligned with her insight and intuition, and understand that this person won't be able to do much work. And speaking of transition or change, unless he or she establishes a deep connection with the people that she's working with. And in order to do that, you need to be human. You need to act like a human. And then you look at things differently. You have conversations around things. There is more ownership of the things that are being done. There is more sensitivity towards the society around the work that you're doing. There is more creativity. There is more imagination. There is more energy in every single individual. Everybody grows. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the Nordic Secret? Thomas Borkman, I think. He talks about, and it's this fascinating story, but it's basically rooted in Scandinavia, when the region changed from being agrarian to being industrial. The leaders of the region recognized that in a time of significant change and unrest in society, that blows open a lot of opportunity for people to be very vulnerable and for people to feel very uneasy, which we can all relate to now. As we said, there's a lot of change happening right now. We're in a very similar moment right now, which is why it's such an amazing book to read, TED Talk to watch. But what he talks about is at that time, the leaders of Scandinavia, they decided to create Nordic folk high schools. And these Nordic folk high schools did one thing and one thing only. They taught a very particular group of people, so they were late teens to early adults, one thing, and it's self-awareness. And the reason why they did that was because they said, if the more self-aware people are, the less susceptible they are to the impact and the power of external forces. You're much stronger and you're rooted in who you are. And so therefore you don't have challenges, sort of authoritarian leaders coming in, people being able to manipulate you. And we can relate to that. You've been through a lot of
Absolutely,
difficult moments. I've been through really difficult moments as well. And when you feel destabilized, you are more susceptible to people manipulating you. And
Absolutely.
The stronger you are, the stronger a region is. And so it was state funded, but it was not state run. And that's what stabilized that region at that time. What's really interesting is in the States, in Tennessee, I think there was a guy who saw the power of this. And it was after the Second World War. And he created a Nordic folk high school, but in the States, there was just one. And it might still be there. I don't know. But anyway, the whole thing is it is focused on self-awareness. And a couple of weeks after one of the students studied at that folk high school, she was on a bus. And she was sitting on a bus and someone said, you need to move. And she said, I'm not moving. And they said, no, but you need to get up. You need to move. You can't sit here. And she said, I'm not getting up. And it was Rosa Parks.
Oh my goodness. That is an incredible story.
And it's really interesting because there's a Andrew Bovarnik who was I think still the global head food and agricultural commodity systems at the UNDP. And this thinking, he says, I used to think that the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought that with 30 years of good science, we could address these problems, but I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy.
Oh, wow. That's very powerful. So I think there's so much truth in that.
Yeah. And I just think it's so interesting. And that's why moving forward, understanding the power of, spending real time, understanding who you are, understanding what is around you, what do you stand for, bringing in those other voices, because the more that you do that, the more secure and solid you become. Also, more innovation happens, the more opportunities there are, but also the healthier communities are, right?
No, absolutely. I so agree. And there's two parallel threads in my book. One is about exactly that, what you say, like when you go out into the world and you allow it to come to you.
Yes.
You explore with an open mind. You're not always intentional about how the day is going to go. So it's like, I'm going to be open and see what comes as well. It can be pockets of time. It could be whole days. However, we develop that. But then at the same time, there's this other parallel stream that's going on. And that is that constant journaling, paying attention to what it is that you pay attention to. And that's like, hi, how are you? You're knocking on yourself, like your own shoulder and saying, hi, are you there? Are we together now? The mind and the body, and are we going through this together? And you pay attention to what you pay attention to, because we pay attention to so many things throughout the day, but do we actually pay attention to what it is that we're paying attention to? And this is what I have found for myself personally, one of the most powerful tools anyone has ever given to me. And I share that in my book as well. So it's like, as you wayfind and navigate a turbulent, constantly moving, changing world, community, work, that you are also constantly allowing yourself to learn, understand, be open to different perspectives, but always checking in on yourself, how it is that you are experiencing them. And then at the same time, you are building a stronger and stronger inner compass, which gives you that strong inner security.
Yeah.
Which I think is wisdom, at least in my case, that's wisdom that comes from spirituality. I haven't learned this from anywhere but spirituality, as strongly at least. It's like spiritualism has so much to teach us, ancient wisdom, ancient books, ancient poetry and mythology. There is so much wisdom there, and there is no one way to explain the world or our place in it. It's not only science. Science changes too. We learn new things. Science is hugely important, but so is imagination. If we can't imagine something different than from what is, how on earth are we going to get there?
Oh, it's fascinating. You do talk at the end of the TED Talk, and I'm sure you talk about it in your book as well, to the point of climate change and planetary and human interconnectedness. How can Insight help the future? And we've touched on this, but from the point of view of the connection with climate change and the challenges that we're facing.
So there are two things to say in that, and there are many, but two things I think most importantly. People who are working in climate today are working to address our biggest global challenges. There is recent research and survey shows that climate scientists have never been as hopeless as now. So hopelessness it drains our energy. It doesn't give us energy. So being aligned with the sea within, with your intuition, not only allows yourself to regenerate instead of getting drained. In order to align with your insight and intuition, you do stuff that regenerates you.
Yeah.
What happens when you do that, you also gain more clarity of mind. So you save yourself time and energy on things that are not that important. What also happens is that your brain starts to rewire differently. So it moves from a fight or flight mode to a more receptive, open, listening we mode, as opposed to I need to protect, So the mindset changes with the physicality of aligning with intuition or insight, if I can put it that way.
God, it's so powerful. About 15 minutes ago, you did talk about thought patterns. And I talk a lot about thought patterns as well. And it is so powerful, isn't it? I mean, it's very easy to get into negative spirals, become the victim. Do you have any tools? Do you have any suggestions for the listeners just for what they can do to try and avoid getting into those negative thought patterns or into those downward spirals, and how you can shift the energy? I'm a big believer in shifting the energy, and it's something that I feel like I've really gotten control of. But I think that's one of the things that on teams, in businesses, if you have a leader that doesn't get that, you create an environment that isn't positive or happy, that creates that connection. And those are awful environments to work in.
Absolutely. So before I do that, I just want to add the second point to the relationship between insight and climate, but just because it's important that I haven't heard it that often, and I just want to add it very briefly. When we trust insight and learn how to work with it, and I teach it through the two rhythms in my book, but when we work with it, you intuitively start to see how things are interconnected.
Yes.
And it becomes your intuitive reaction to, let's say, circular economy or sustainability. Those two huge challenges, they are not linear, they're not in boxes. They actually require us to think about how everything is interconnected and understand how that works. So the logic of intuition gets us there. So let's go to your last question about what do I want to share with people? What are the tools I want to share with? So my book is full of tools. To choose one, I'm going to take us to the big picture. I've already mentioned pay attention to what you pay attention to, and jot it down in your journal. Just allow it to come and unfold for you. But another thing I want to just lay out is I work a lot with the two rhythms. So let's imagine we are made up of two rhythms. One breathes in, one breathes out. One is receiving, the other one is calculating. One is contemplating, while the other one is planning. When we harness these two rhythms, we put everything in motion that has to do with our intelligence and body and presence, and we are more able to be in the now and heighten our intelligence and insights into things. Some of the tricks to get to that place are things that we already know. It's like when you leave work, leave work, do something else. Go for a comic evening, go to the cinema, go for a run, laugh, have a laugh. It's okay to be joyful when the world seems to be collapsing. It's okay. There are limits to what we can do, and joy and laughter and companionship gives us a lot of energy and sense of purpose. Another thing is basic things like sleep well. Let your brain do its washing up.
Yeah,
You know,
so
let it do the washing up, clean things out and throw out the toxic waste and bring in some new stuff so that you feel fresh tomorrow. Care for yourself. Be your cheerleader, number one. It's okay to think critically, both outside and inside, but know why you're doing it. The most important things that we ever say are the things that we say to ourselves. These are very important things. So I would think about 2 rhythms. What are your 2 rhythms? You know your work rhythm. If you are somebody who's working a lot and needs to hear this, you will know your work rhythm. What are you doing at work? How does it make you feel physically? Do something that's opposite. Attend to the garden. Make beautiful food. You know, breathe in fresh air. Do yoga. Whatever it is that makes you go into a different rhythm.
Such good advice. Such good advice. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you'd like to tell our listeners?
We've covered a lot of ground. Maybe just to say, have a conversation with friends and family. Try it out for one evening at the dinner table. Talk about intuition. Tell them about insight. Maybe you can pose the question, when was the last time you listened to your insight, your intuition, and what happened next? Try it out.
So good. I will include the details for your book. I will include the details for your TED Talk. I highly recommend people getting stuck into both. And thank you for joining us. It's been an honor.
Same here. Thank you so much.
Until the next time.
Hey everyone, this is Philippa again. I hope you enjoyed listening. Now this is your chance to get involved with TIE. If you're looking to create better leaders, better companies, and a better world, that's just what we do by helping leaders tap into their greatest asset, their humanity. We have a number of corporate programs that impact a range of people, from individuals at a company to 500 people around a business. Or check out my book, Return on Humanity, Leadership Lessons from All Corners of the World. You'll find the answers to how business can truly become a positive force while remaining at the forefront of competition. You can find all the information you need on all of this at TIEleadership.com. Get in touch and I can explain more. A huge thanks to Berna Vieira for co-producing this with me and for creating the music. I hope we'll meet up again soon.